right. You ready?
Yep.
What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to episode 5 of the Coach's Corner, where we put 2 soccer coaches in the same virtual space and we see what happens. As always, my name is Will Selden, and I represent the high school coach portion of this conversation. And joining me again today is the head coach and sporting director of the Richmond Kickers, Darren Sawatzky. Darren, thanks for joining me yet again.
Good to see you, Will. Looking forward to talking.
Likewise. So before we get going on today's stuff, I want to follow up on something that we talked about last week. And that was kind of in the middle of our nerdy soccer conversation. And I'd love to follow up on something that we didn't get to. So we talked a lot about how tactics have changed over your coaching career. And we referenced kind of the preeminent coaching rivalry of our time right now, which is Klopp and Guardiola, in my opinion, at least. And so we talked about how those guys have kind of shifted their tactical setups over their careers and how that may trickle down to coaches like me. So I'd love to talk about how those changing tactical setups might influence roles within a team. And so you've spoken a lot about how what you get out of tactical setups is where you might want to attack space or where you might want to give up space. And so you kind of see the game in that way. And so I think an important thing to notice is kind of the increased and decreased importance of specific roles within systems as they change. So that's what I want to talk about first today. And so in our little email exchange before this, I titled it "The Rise and Fall of the Number 10," which is probably a little bit too fancy wording for this conversation, but I have some thoughts on that. I'd love to hear yours first and foremost about just increased importance on specific roles because of changes to tactics.
The number 10 question is a really interesting one because I actually remember all the way back into the mid-90s when, in MLS you had guys like Carlos Valderrama and Marco Echeverri who could easily have played at any in the leagues of the world. They were unbelievable players. And then there was this weird shift from a true number 10 playmaker to kind of rotating that role. I think of like the 08 Columbus Crew had Shaloto and Higuain more recently. I mean, they're definitive playmakers, but not all teams use those, I don't know. I think that a lot of teams now share the role. And I think that a lot of that came out of the Spanish stuff. You could have 3 or 4 guys on a lot of those tops, Barcelona teams, Real Madrid teams that they could be the number 10 and rotate and, the 11th and the 10 switch and stuff. So I just think that it depends a lot on matchups and where you want to attack teams.
Yeah. So maybe this conversation will kind of break down my mental barriers of tactical setups and how I see them differently. So the reason I bring this conversation up is because, not to reference too frequently the Klopp thing. Everyone knows that we're Liverpool supporters, but we'll try to stay away from that as much as possible. However, this is a really great example, in my opinion. So his teams at Dortmund, he was kind of famous for playing his 4-2-3-1 system. And then when he came to Liverpool in the beginning, that's what he used, I guess, because that was familiar and easy to implement. And so the way I see that is you have 2 like 6s, like a double pivot in midfield, and then you have a front 3 with a target striker, more or less. But the way I see it is there's a number 10 in the middle. And so I feel like we've seen over the past 3-ish, 4 years, his time at Liverpool, we've moved away from that big time. And so now I feel like the predominant system that's played for a lot of the big teams is a 4-3-3 or variations of that. That seems to be the fashion system right now. And so I think there was a place for those like creative playmakers like you referenced in that 4-2-3-1 system. I'm not sure that there is in the 4-3-3, which is why I bring this up. And I'd love to get your opinion on this. So I see kind of the 4-3-3 now as a midfield trio with 2 number 8s in front of a number 6. So like you have more box-to-box players as opposed to a strict creative midfielder. But I'd love to hear your take on that.
I don't get too hung up on who's the number 10, who's the number, even on the flanks to take it out of the middle of the field. If you have a system where you're attacking and creating overloads on the flanks, your number 2, your 7, or your 11 and your 3 they interchange, right? Or even a number 6 pops out, a 2 goes higher, and a 7 comes inside to create another number 10. I think that there's a lot more fluidity in modern systems and the way they play. And to reference Liverpool, which I'm happy to keep talking about, I think that club, I think one, you can't make lemonade without lemons, and they're full of great players that can play multiple roles. You take a guy like Milner. I think Milner's played almost every position on the field for Liverpool and other clubs, and I think they ask those guys to do things together rather than individually. So one game, Firmino looks unbelievable in his ability to play make, and then the next game it's a little bit more, direct with Henderson or whatever. And I think it's less about positions and numbers of positions and more about what the collective is trying to do. And my personal opinion is that's how Klopp's kind of evolved that team. He's asking the group to do certain things and control spaces of the field. And, with that, the profiles of players, there's certain things that have to exist in the player in order for you to ask them to do that as a group. That team's very fit, and how they train and the level of intensity. We read everything that they do. We don't know exactly what they tell them, but, emulating that, I think, is more about the collective.
In reference to these changing tactics and how they influence roles, the fullback or the outside back is an interesting one to me. And there's a quote from Jamie Carragher a couple of years ago, and he said, "Nobody wants to grow up and be a Gary Neville." And what he meant was nobody wants to grow up and be a defensive-minded fullback because it's perceived boring and whatever you want to say about it. I think that role has shifted big time in the past couple of years. And again, looking through the Liverpool lens, you have players like Trent Alexander-Arnold and Andy Robertson who have revolutionized is maybe a strong word, but they've definitely changed the perception of the role, in my opinion. And so obviously you have to use the players' qualities that you have, but is that an example of you seeing something and then maybe being able to implement that and like a new idea that you might be able to implement or something else?
Having that level of player to work with allows a lot more freedom in what you do. I'm not going to try to break down how Pep Guardiola tactically goes after teams, that he's one of the top coaches on the planet, right? But if you have Kyle Walker and Mendy, for example, as your outside backs, you can do a whole lot more. And when De Bruyne is in your midfield and stuff, they take pressure off of those players and allow them to get forward in the game. Sometimes, Kyle Walker pops inside or whatever to help make the game as another 6 or whatever it is. Those are pretty advanced concepts based on asking players to be able to rotate and do things that, frankly, not all professional players can do. And developing professional players like our league, that's a pretty big ask. As it relates to the modern fullback, of course, we would love guys that can run 18-yard box to 18-yard box and join in to create overloads as a flank player or underneath and combine. We'll try to do as much of that type of football as we can here in Richmond, but it's really related to what you have and playing to your strengths. And, there's this balance between trying to go for it and play attacking soccer, and it's fun. But if your mistakes are too great, then the risk outweighs the reward, and you end up getting caught on the counter all the time because you're trying to play like Liverpool in USL League One. It may not exactly work out for you. So
I want to switch gears a little bit. And this is a little bit of a different kind of conversation and one that I just want to kind of bring some attention back to maybe your career, maybe my career, if people are interested in it, probably not. But I'd love to ask you kind of a standalone question. If you had to pick like a top 3 or a top 5 favorite moments of your soccer life, so playing career, coaching career, which I know is a massive question.
Thanks for that.
Yeah, no problem. So if you can boil it down to those, first of all, I'd be very impressed. And second of all, I would be very interested to hear those.
In 1989, 1990, when that young group of U.S. players went to Italia 90 after Caligiuri hit the shot heard around the world when we beat Trinidad to qualify for the World Cup.
Amazing goal goal by Caligiuri, who made a great move to get by one player and then hit this rock. Look at this good move, and then the left foot, just a super volley into that far corner.
I remember, much to my dad's chagrin, skipping school to watch the U.S. play Italy in particular. And there was a point of the game where I think Bruce Murray hit the shot and Walter Zenga was a goalkeeper for Italy. And the ball bounces, and if Zenga's ass wasn't so big, it would have gone in and it would have tied the game up, which here's this group of 23-year-old Americans that weren't that much older than I was at the time. And they were playing with one of the top teams in the world at the time, with great players like Maldini and just, unbelievable soccer players. So that was my junior year of high school. That summer, I actually went to Europe on a tour for 4 weeks, played in the Harlem Cup in Holland. We went to Germany, we went to Scotland, and that was a defining moment for me, because I went from being this scrubby kid from Federway with I played all sports, to falling in love with football on the world level. So that was probably the thing that did it. There's a coach in Seattle named Wade Weber, who was my high school soccer coach, and he helped guide it. That probably leads into the second biggest thing was playing for Clive Charles at the University of Portland. Clive passed away a few years ago from prostate cancer, but he is widely regarded as one of the best coach, person, and player developers that we've ever seen. And I would put him against any of the coaches that I played for. He was unbelievable. He taught me a lot about the game and lessons that I still use today. And I don't know, the last one on the playing side was just that MLS draft in '96. I went to New England, and it was just a huge moment. I had a really good year there, but more importantly, it was just the MLS was born. And there was 150 Americans that got drafted and played that year in that league. And to look at where the league is now, I'm really proud that I got to be a part of that first group. And I'm still trying to be involved in the game at whatever level and help it grow in America. But to see where it is now is amazing.
Yeah, that's super cool. All right, so on a coaching side of things, I want to push you a little bit more on a coaching side of things. Let's have two more.
In 2008, a year before the Sounders came into Major League Soccer, I was coaching with Brian Smetzer, and we had won the USL. Well, it's the equivalent of what the USL Championship now. The A-League, we'd won the national championship in 2007. And as we
away, but there's the final whistle, and Seattle prevail, defeating Atlanta by a score of 4-0, and it's a fourth USL championship for the Sounders. And they did it in style.
And as we were going into 2008, we knew within our group that we were that team was going MLS. And I got asked by Adrian Hanauer if I would put together the first Sounders Academy, right? And that's when we started it. And as a coach, we built that academy very quickly into something where we made a lot of mistakes, but we also gave a pathway for guys like DeAndre Edlin, Jordan Morris, other guys that not everybody hears every day, like Jordan Schweitzer and Darwin Jones and Sean Okoli and Aaron Kovar, and these guys that were signed to homegrowns and moved into the league. And right now there's a whole lot of guys in MLS, in USL Championship, USL League One, and other leagues in and out of the country that came out of that Sounder Academy and Sounder U23 program. So I'm just really proud that I got to be a part of something that helped build that. Coaching, winning that 2007 national championship was great. I've got to be a part of a lot of championships on a lot of levels. And the interesting part that you're a high school coach, and I played at Thomas Jefferson High School and then got to go back and win a state championship with them in 2005. And I still talk to a lot of guys off of that team just because of the connections that we had made. And that was a special opportunity. So, and I would be remiss in saying that getting reunited with Rob Ukrop and the great people in Richmond, I'm so, like, every day I wake up super positive, even through everything we're going through, because it's such a cool reunion 25 years later to get an opportunity to help him build the brand that they already have here. That's incredible. So I'm excited to be a part of that.
That's super cool. Yeah, those are some great moments for sure. And on behalf of the club, not that you need to hear it again, but we're super lucky to have you, and I'm just excited for the city of Richmond and the fans to see your teams play. I'm sure it's going to be super exciting. So, I think we'll stop it there. But just before we go, going forward, I'm super lucky that I get to kind of pick your brain and ask questions and have conversation and back and forth with you about a lot of different stuff, and I get to choose what we talk about, which I'm super lucky. But I would love to see if we can kind of poll some people in the Richmond community and get some questions from them and do sort of a Q&A type thing going forward. So if you're interested, feel free to submit questions, whether that's on Twitter using the hashtag AskCC. Maybe there'll be a little graphic below me. That'd be really cool. AskCC, or DM us, email us, whatever you want to do. So you can ask questions to Darren. You can ask questions to me if you're interested. And we'll just have some different kind of topics of conversation. They can be tactical. They can be about your career, about my career, about our interests, whatever you want to talk about. But we'd love to get some of those questions to talk about. So hashtag AskCC is the hashtag to use, and we'll definitely cover some of those in the upcoming weeks. So thank you in advance. And Darren, thank you once again for joining me for this episode of Coach's Corner. And I personally am looking forward to the next one.
Great, man. Thanks, Will. Talk to you soon, man.
Thank you. Out.